Hello and welcome back to Vindexx Engineering. In this episode we're going to go over how to modify an engine stand to run an engine on it, and I'll also explain what I learned over the weekend and how I got my engine running. Stay tuned. The first thing I wanted to do in modifying the engine stand was to add extra supports where the engine mounting bracket's normally located. This involves taking this 1/8" steel and drilling it in the same pattern as what the engine mounting brackets are. After marking this steel for where the holes need to go, I used a punch to set the initial spot. As you can see, I'm not using a standard drill bit, but rather a step bit. This allows me to get the perfect size hole for the bolt that I'm using. The other thing you want to do when drilling is to make sure that you use plenty of oil to keep the drill bit lubricated. Now I'm using an old bed frame for the angle iron to add the support brackets to the engine stand. Always be sure to use proper eye and ear protection when using cutters such as this. Here I am measuring to make sure that the support bracket is going to line up with where the engine mount is. After measuring for proper length and removing the excess paint from the spot where it's going to be welded, it's time to weld the new support in place. I built the extra supports with leftover steel from the initial car project and some cheap casters from Harbor Freight. After test fitting the initial brackets I made for the engine mounts, they were too long and needed to be cut down to fit properly. Now I'm welding the support bracket from the engine mounting plate to the bottom of the engine stand. Now that the support brackets are done, I can go on finishing up the rest of the stuff for the engine, such as getting the fuel lines hooked up, the fuel return line hooked up, all the electronics, and testing the engine. Now I'm putting the new plug wires on the engine. I'll put a link in the description for where I got them. Now I'm working on installing the air temperature sensor into the intake. To prevent having any debris go inside the intake, I have a shop vac hooked up through the front of the throttle body to catch any of the plastic debris. Over the course of the next few hours, I go through and get all of the fuel lines plumbed in using the fuel pump that I got off eBay, only to realize that the fuel pump was indeed bad, and it was a good thing that the company was sending me a second one for free. At this point, I have everything hooked up to it, fuel's ready, and I'm trying to start the engine, but it's not firing. At this point, I'm not sure what the reason is, but I'm getting no spark and no power to the injectors. I'm going through and double checking all the settings, making sure I didn't forget something in the wiring diagram. Go through and double check all the connections on all the sensors. And at this point, I'm completely stumped. So where do I turn to? The Sloppy Mechanics Facebook page. I reached out there and there was a couple of nice people that were able to help me trace back some wiring on it. And after tracing back all the wiring, I found out what the problem was. Hello YouTube and welcome back. I wanted to give you all an update on the project of the LS engine here and what I found after troubleshooting this engine for the last few days. So at first, when I was going through this engine, I wasn't getting any spark and I wasn't getting any voltage on the injectors. So I wasn't sure if it was something with a ground, if it was something with a sensor not working right. So I ended up going through and redesigning my whole test bench here. So basically I got a switch for my fuel pump. I got an ignition switch for the Terminator X. And then I actually have a switch right here, which will turn the motor over. If I turn on that one, turn that one on. It turns out that there is a extra positive wire. So you have this 3 bundle of wires that I thought were all optional because one is for a tachometer, the green one is for a secondary fuel pump, and so the red one that was bundled with it I thought was optional as well. Turns out that this one is not. That is the actual one that powers the coil packs and it powers the injectors. So when you go to wire up your Terminator X, you got to make sure that you have that red wire hooked up straight to a battery. You got to have the other one that goes to the wire harness for the Terminator X, and then you need the red one for your switch to turn off and on your actual Terminator X itself. Once you do all that, then the thing fires up just like it's supposed to. So I hope this was insightful for anybody that is doing a Terminator X project. Yeah, enjoy. Once I had the engine up and running, made sure that everything worked, it was time to do some cleanup and some disassembly.